Binaural beats is the phenomena that occurs when the brain perceives the differential between two tones in a stereo field as a pulse. For example, using a pair of stereo headphones, one could play a sine wave at 500 Hz in the left ear and 510 Hz in the right, creating a binaural beat of 10 Hz. The beat created is designed to stimulate brainwave activity that operates within the same frequency band. Brainwave activity falls between certain ranges, representing varying stages of alertness or cognitive ability. It is said that by using this technique, it is possible to entrain the mind into a desired state at will. The frequency ranges and their associated mental states are as follows. 40 Hz is gamma waves and is associated with higher mental activity, increased perception, alert problem solving, fearful state. 13 to 39 Hz is beta waves and is associated with being active, busy, states of concentration, aroused, cognition, paranoia. 7 to 13 Hz is the alpha state and is associated with relaxation, pre-sleep and pre-wake drowsiness, REM sleep and dreams. 4 to 7 Hz is the theta wave state and is associated with deep meditation, relaxation and NREM sleep. 4 Hz is the delta wave state and is associated with deep dreamless sleep, loss of bodily awareness. Wikipedia states that this effect was first observed in the 1830s by a man named Heinrich William Dove. However, it seems the principles of binaural beats may have been observed much earlier by Dutch mathematician Christian Huygens in approximately 1665. Huygens is famous for the discovery of centrifugal force, for pushing the theory that light consisted of waves, and for his observations on the perception of sound. He is also noted as being the inventor of the pendulum clock, which led to his further observations on the process of entrainment. He had a room with a number of pendulum-driven clocks in it, and he observed that over time the pendulums of the clocks all fell into synchronization with each other, even if he deliberately started them swaying at different times. He would inevitably return to find they had resynchronized themselves with each other. He called this synchronization tendency entrainment. Further research conducted in the 1970s by Charles Strobel, PhD, MD, explored the notion that many great thinkers seem to have greater synchronization of their right and left hemispheres of the brain. Experiments on experienced meditators showed that when in deep meditative states, both sides of the brain are working in perfect harmony, while when not meditating, there is a tendency for domination on the part of one specific hemisphere. It seems that by using binaural beats, it is possible to induce a deep meditative state at will and create balanced brainwave activity. But is this really true? The process of entrainment using a patented form of binaural beats called holosync, product of the Centrepoint Research Institute, cites benefits such as meditate as deeply than an experienced Zen monk, literally at the touch of a button. Virtually eliminate stress from your life. Naturally and safely stimulate the production of brain chemicals that dramatically slow aging and increase longevity. Boost your mental powers to unheard of levels. Eliminate most so-called dysfunctional feelings and behaviours and the problems they create in your life. and attain a level of happiness and inner peace you may not have thought possible. Bold claims indeed, but is there any solid, peer-reviewed scientific studies that confirm such beneficial effects? Well, as it transpires, there has been extensive research conducted that has been verified and compiled many times into research papers on the subject. The most notable of which is a paper published in Scientific American in 1973 entitled Auditory Beats in the Brain by Dr. Gerald Oster. It explained that when tones of different frequencies were played into each ear, that pulsations occurred in the brain. He called these pulsations binaural beats. The research concluded that binaural beats do indeed create a state of synchronization between the hemispheres of the brain, and that it was possible to manage brainwave states according to desire. The paper inspired a considerable amount of excitement, and many further studies were conducted which delivered evidence that binaural beats has many applications. In literally thousands of experiments conducted in the 1970s by Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences, an EEG meter was used to measure the brainwave activity during binaural beat sessions. Monroe also concluded that rather than only affecting a certain area of the brain, the entire brain resonated to the specific frequency created by the two tones. This phenomena has been verified in multiple experiments by many researchers since then, including Dr. Suzanne Evan Morris, who concluded that research supports the theory that different frequencies presented to each ear through stereo headphones create a different tone, or binaural beat, as the brain puts together the two tones it actually hears. Through EEG monitoring, the different tone is identified by a change in the electrical pattern produced by the brain. For example, frequencies of 200 Hz and 210 Hz produce a binaural beat frequency of 10 Hz. Monitoring of the brain's electricity, EEG, shows that the brain produces increased 10 Hz activity with equal frequency and amplitude of the waveform in both hemispheres. Psychological benefits of binaural beats are cited in multiple papers. A comprehensive summary of over 20 such papers by Tina L. Huang, PhD, and Christine Chariton, PhD, and concluded that brainwave entrainment utilising this method is an effective therapeutic tool, and that the immediate psychological effects on memory, attention, stress, pain, headaches and migraines were shown to benefit from even a single session of brainwave entrainment. Surprisingly, research conducted found that the use of binaural beats actually increased the production of three key hormones associated with longevity of life and general well-being: cortisol, DHEA and melatonin. Cortisol is found in the adrenal glands and impacts learning and memory. DHEA is used as source ingredient for virtually every good hormone the body needs and helps our immune system. Melatonin is a chemical produced during deep natural sleep. Having lots of DHEA and melatonin is good for us. At this point, the sheer volume of available research on the benefits of binaural beat entrainment can become a little overwhelming, with multiple papers citing the many following beneficial findings. Increases in IQ between 23 and 33%. Improved visual retention, i.e. memory, auditory memory, reading and arithmetic. long-term improvements in concentration and self-esteem, reduced anxiety levels, improved sleep patterns, treatment in depression and alcoholism. This experiment involved 2 groups of alcoholics. One group was sent to a regular 12-step AA program for help with their condition. It was a control group. The other group received no counselling, but were sent for 15 20-minute sessions of alpha and theta binaural beats usage. These were the experimental group. Within the AA attending control group, alcoholism relapse rates 13 months after the test were at 80%. There was no change in levels of depression as measured by Beck's Depression Inventory. Within the binaural beat using experimental group, 13 months later there was only a 20% relapse and levels of depression had reduced to that of a third non-alcoholic control group. Unfortunately, for ethical reasons, it was not possible to enlist volunteers for experimentation using binaural beats. However, a certain degree of personal experimentation has been conducted. Objectively, it is difficult to discern whether or not your brainwave activity is noticeably different. However, nothing has been observed which would contradict any of the findings included in this episode. The UK Synesthesia Association on its homepage describes synesthesia in its simplest form as a union of the senses. This union can take multiple forms. Some synesthetes can taste shapes, others can smell colour or perceive letters and numbers in vibrant hues. The word synesthesia is derived from the Greek word meaning perceive together, with the most common joining of perceptions being the colorization of sound. It is this specific area that will be explored in depth herein. For many scientists, the condition proves to be quite a puzzling phenomenon. Studies have confirmed that the phenomenon is biological, automatic, and apparently unlearned, distinct from both hallucination and metaphor. Most synesthetes do not see their condition as a hindrance, and when asked if they would prefer to be without it, they consistently reply negatively, stating that it would be like being deprived of a sense. Only in a few rare instances have synesthetes reported experiencing a sort of sensory overload as a result of their condition, and sometimes feel exhausted when exposed to large amounts of stimulus. Surprisingly, very little study was conducted on synesthesia during the 20th century, despite introductory experimentation being conducted as early as the late 1800s. So there is still much debate today as to the causes of the condition and the areas of the brain from which the particular manifestations arise. Some studies have suggested that synesthesia is linked to the X chromosome, as it is hereditary but does not seem to be passed from father to son, and it is most common among women. Despite massive leaps in the field of neuroscience, there still does not exist a solid understanding of the mechanisms involved in synesthesia, resulting in several competing theories, all of which require significantly more research before they could be cited as a valid hypothesis. With this being the case, it was deemed that first-hand research would prove useful in further understanding this unusual condition. This is Stuart, a synesthete who can see sound as colour. This interview was conducted in 2012. However, I remain in contact with Stuart and he has agreed to answer any additional questions anyone may have after seeing this documentary. If you have any questions for Stuart that were not asked in this interview, please leave a comment in the comments section or perhaps submit a video which we could use as part of future episodes.
When did you first realize you had synesthesia? There's a difference between first being aware of it and knowing what it was, and first noticing it. It's been there all my life. So that, you know, when I was younger, around music and stuff, I'm quite animated. I was aware of it, the things being bright. It just seemed to be a general brightness. My memories come from not being aware of it though, just thinking that's how things were.
Yeah.
I only became aware of it when I knew what it was when I was about 30. And it'd been a sort of a TV programme and they were talking about it, and it was the answer to synesthesia was the answer to one of the questions. And when they described it, and I looked into it, and I thought, well, that's how I've lived my entire life. You know, just general throngs have a kind of background palette of one thing would be something that maybe Ben's New Year party. There was a kind of green throng, almost like a fog, dragging from the roof, and the people noises were kind of going through it. Now that I know what it is, I can zone into it, and things have the very definite throngs, amplified music, rhythmic music has its definite currents, its shapes, the way it moves, and I know that now. Before, I just thought that's what music did to people. I just thought I just thought that was how everyone saw everything. So there was no reason to question or no reason to exclaim, or it's not like it's like, whoa, whoo, shooting flash of colour. That's not how it works.
No.
It's just a very natural part of the environment and the very natural part of the particularly music experience. I would say it is actually a noise experience, but obviously music it's more defined and it moves.
So is there an absence of color when you are in silence?
I don't know. I'm very rarely in absolute silence.
Yeah.
I don't like silence. I don't know if that's something to do with it. I've been in quiet places, but they're never really silent. Maybe there's an experiment in itself.
Yeah.
Absolute silence. Because I always put something on for background noise. I don't care for it being quiet. I don't know whether that's maybe there is something missing and just subconsciously the brain says, oh, don't like that, we'll have it back please.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's maybe something else to think about.
Was there a favorite song from your childhood that you listened to for its color association?
When I was younger, no. Like when I was really young, no. I just kind of listened to what music was on and things like that. There was a lot of bagpipes. I remember there was a bagpipe player turned up in a New Year party when we lived in Berwick-on-Tweed. And the whole swirling of the sound and so on. I was only very young, kind of vague memories of it, but I remember being quite entranced by that. It was quite a dirty sound, you know, quite a raw sound. The first time I went like bang and the whole thing of music changed when it was two punks sitting in a car listening to Public Image Limited, and I ran across from the playground at school to ask them to turn it up, which she did. And that was, there was a different music thing. Because I could see this kind of, like I could see the dark rumbling of the bass. That sounds so, but it was like I got a whole sense that it wasn't just what I was hearing, that everything was moving to that, and it tuned into that kind of music, and it ended up going more down a noisy, more abrasive path because it was. I noticed that things that had rhythm but had angular elements, you know, like the clanging guitar sounds. There's these angular kind of colours. Things coming in an angular and clash is always more interesting than just something like floating around.
Does the color you see have shape?
Thrash metal is like where you come on the chunky riffs. It's like slabs of, it's browny black mostly. It's kind of like, you know, A good band for that is I Hate God. They've got a punk element, more punk element, punk, bluesy, thrash. I won't go into the whole backstory, but they do like this, and then they've got this really weird timing thing they do then where they like draw out the last note. And I'm not a guitar player, I'm not trying to play air guitar, but it's more where the sound goes. The slab kind of goes boom, and then when they draw it out, it kind of goes boom, and it pulls back in itself. And I saw them live in Denmark last year, and it was, you could just see all these slabs, and they don't use, it's not guitar solos, they don't use that at all, they use like noises and drones, and you've got these slabs coming down and the drones kind of cut them.
Is the condition triggered more by rhythmic elements than tone, or is it a combination of both?
I think I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. If there's more an attachment, if I'm more enjoying it more accentuates it if I'm into it. So just a tone is only going to engage me so much, I reckon.
Right.
But I can definitely tune into tones and see what it's doing. But that actually requires a bit of work. But if you're into a situation and you're into the music and it is rhythmic and it's got a hold of you, then I think maybe you're relaxed and it kind of just does its thing a little bit.
For example, if I were playing a piano, would you be able to identify different colors for each note?
Yeah, but whether they would be consistent or not is another thing entirely. I mean, sure, any kind of thing, but it would probably need to be like, not just going doing, but they sort of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
right,
and it just comes off it a little, and it kind of grows in signal, if you like.
Do these visual manifestations emanate from the source of the sound?
Probably different experiences with different sources of sound. If you're in the house and you've got the stereo up and you're doing your housework and everything, it's just be a gentle kind of, it's gentle. But if you're in like a throng, a crowd, which has its own sort of constant rhythmic sound, voices and stuff, and you've got live music coming through like big amps, it does tend to emanate from the direction of the music and emanate from the stage, if you like. Don't want to get all jacked black and sort of, thunder and lightning coming from the amps or anything like that. It's not like that at all. But there is the general concentration of the colour and its offshoots are centred around where the noise is coming from.
Have you experienced any other form of synesthesia? For example, taste or seeing black text with color?
Nothing text-wise at all.
No.
Nothing at all. Taste-wise, only twice, curiously, Mozart tasted like chocolate.
Which particular Mozart piece?
I don't know. It was just sitting in a house. Every time we played this particular part of the track, it got this like quite dark chocolatey taste. Not that initial sweetness, like when it's melted in your mouth, and that almost coffee taste. Like at the back of your mouth, and curiously, the bartender and the thief, by Stereophonics, breaks my heart. It tasted like it tasted like the smell of freshly ground orange peels. Not quite like biting into an orange, just that kind of when you smell really strong orange. Again, that slight taste you get from the smell. Which breaks my heart because I've tried other music I like and I've tasted nothing, not a thing. And then, like the Stereophonics come around and invoke something else. It just.
In this instance, is it possible that memory association may also be a factor?
There could be something in that because I think they've got a constant, and no matter what they did with their sound, his voice is going to be the same. So I'm wondering if it's his voice. It could be a memory of when I worked in France, beach town, stroke rural area, fresh fruit. They played at a local festival. It could be some subconscious memory. I have no idea.
You had said that metal music, in particular, produced a strong visual response. Is this what draws you to the genre?
That's open to conjecture, because I just happened to like what was coming out of the car. Now, yeah, I was drawn to it because of the. Looking back, there was clearly so I could get a whole picture. It was invoking pictures and images and colours, and I'd never really felt music like that. But maybe that was just luck. And obviously going down that route, you're not a great leap from Public Hours on it to Sex Pistols. So the noisy thing, obviously looking back now, I didn't realise at the time, but it was busier and there was more going on. It could have been. I mean, there'll be other people out there who listen to classical music, and they'll have all sorts going on. It's just, I guess that's just where I went. It's just the music I was introduced to that kind of got me, resonated with me, and then I hope I just set myself about noisy music.
How does the effect differ between analog and digital formats? That is, vinyl versus MP3.
I'm loath to say this, because when you hear old vinyl heads going on about how the sound's warmer, the colours are slightly warmer. You get kind of more a golden, more orangey hue from listening to an old record. I won't listen to a Beatles record, I won't lie. I'm sure they're great for it. I've heard they are magic, not for me. But say if I was to play Eddie and the Stooges, Raw Power, now if I was to play that on vinyl, it would have the same kind of, angular kind of, and there's that kind of, that 60s kind of beat going on, but with the angular guitars, the vocals being at odds with it, with some of the harmonies. It's all, it's quite messy, but there's a kind of warmth to the vinyl sound. If you play it on CD or straight from a digital source, there is something that isn't there. Is it in the speakers?
What about the shape? Do you think there's a difference in the shape of what you see?
They're softer from vinyl.
Right.
They're softer. They're not so precise, which makes complete sense. You're getting a precise sound, and in some ways it's better, because in the digital remasters of Raw Power, there are things there that you miss from the simplicity of vinyl and the limitations of the recording process. The little clangs, and which are in themselves are little jabs into the general picture. So yeah, I would say there is a difference, in my experience. But again, is that, I mean, there's so little known about this. Is that me wanting it to be because I'm nostalgic about that recording it? Do I want it to be a warmer sound in its original form? Yeah, I mean, it's not a big crash bang pow difference, but there is just a general. If you imagine like a background palette, just not the actual music itself. I mean, it was recorded the way it was recorded. The notes were struck the way they were struck. There's just a general, a warmer. I keep calling it a throng, because I want people to get the idea of this kind of just gently vibrating, gently undulating colour. Your sight's not blocked out, it's very flimsy. It's like an echo.
Are there any instances when the condition is distracting or inconvenient? For example, when watching a film, can the sound affect the image on screen?
No, because it's been there all life, just how it is. So if you could switch it on and off, I'm sure it would be an interference, but it's not, because you're watching the film, you're engaged. If it's good enough, you're engaged in the story. It really is just secondary. It's just there. It just probably a small enhancement. It's just there. So It's not. No, I can't say it's ever been inhibited.
Is mood or emotional state a factor in what you see?
Yeah, I think that definitely the more you're relaxed, the more you're maybe in a frame of mind to drift off the music and you know, let it drift in and you know, be a part of it. I think well, recently I've had a lot of stress, a lot of dark feelings, I think, and that's, again, you're probably more attracted to darker music, but I've noticed that there isn't quite it does dampen a little. I think when you're more emotionally happy and open to kind of being able to drift off and sort of let yourself go into things, I think there's an element of that, yeah.
You mentioned you had met another synesthete once, but his condition differed from yours. Can you explain the difference between internal and external synesthesia?
I can, but only from what he said, and comparing it to my experience external. Basically, really, what he talked about was it was a very definite block right inside his head. That eyes are open or closed, I believe. Probably, if he wanted to zone in, I'd imagine maybe close his eyes so he could internalise. But anyway, it seemed to be a very definite block of colour and shape that changed colour and moved, almost like an internal graphic equaliser that moved in all directions, not just up and down. But it seemed to have very definite spikes or very definite movements from this original form, but it seemed to be a solid, definite block, whereas externally, you see it as a part of everyday life, and it's vaguer. It's not as pronounced. It's not as solid. It can get reasonably pronounced, but his seems to be a very definite, solid block of colours or colour that changes, morphs, moves in all kind of different directions. That's not mine's a general. It's part of the whole picture.
Do you still see sound when your eyes are closed?
Yeah, much like you know, in fact you could do it right now. If you looked out the window and looked at the trees, because it's quite bright, and you close your eyes, you know you still got the outline and the kind of bright bits are making the shadow, the silhouette, if you like. You still get that residue. That's what it's like with your eyes closed. You lose the immediacy of what you see, but then you've still got the colours are still there.
Right, yeah. So, for example, when you said...
But not, it doesn't, sorry, just while I remember, it's not like what Rory experiences. It doesn't become any more solid, and it doesn't become any more internal, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
You're seeing them inside your eyelids, if you like, but it's still external.
Right.
Although the idea has largely been debunked, some researchers suggest it may be a hallucinogenic experience. Do you understand this comparison?
I understand it because it is not the normal, regular way to see the world. The majority of people do not see the world in that way. So I understand the comparison. I just think it's a bit lazy because there's nothing hallucinatory about it. That's how I see the world. That opens another kind of wonder of what are hallucinations, but we'll not go there. It's just, how I'll put this, I've gone out of my way to hallucinate, so I know what a hallucination is, and it's different because it's not real. You know, there's a very definite line, like you know that's coming from your mind. Your mind is creating that effect, as is whatever stimuli you use to create the effect. It's a created effect. With the synesthesia, it's not a created effect. It's a real effect. It's a real filter, if you like. It's just there. I can't explain it. I can't even go close to the mechanics of it, nor would I dare. I just know that there's a very definite thing that's a hallucination, and a very definite thing that isn't. And you feel a hallucination in a different way. There's more of a, you wonder what's going to happen next, an hallucination. you don't wonder what's going to happen next with synesthesia, because it's going to do it once anyway. It's there. It doesn't. It's as automatic as breathing. So there's nothing forced. It's completely different from hallucination.
How has the condition developed throughout your life? Has it always been constant, or has it gotten stronger with age?
No, it's got weaker. It definitely has got more mellow. Whether that's me just bits of the brain taking it for granted now, and it maybe integrates into your mind as you get older. That's just a little theory I came up with. Myself, I haven't really read anything about it. Again, it's kind of hard to put. I can only go by what, looking back on it. These aren't actual memories as such, because I wasn't aware of what it was at the time. So yeah, I do remember it being more pronounced, and I remember talking to more people about music and shapes of terms and colours. That happens less now. Why, I don't know, whether your mind just gets used to it. Now, definitely, I get very definite. I mean, it's always there, but it is less pronounced, maybe less dramatic, if you like, as I get older.
After the interview, Stuart allowed me to conduct a series of experiments. This involved playing a series of tones through a pair of headphones and asking Stuart to select on a colour palette the colour that closest matches what he sees. Tones were selected that were incrementally higher than the last to see if the harmonics formed a variation on the original colour. Slight increases as well as repetition of certain tones were also tried, with very interesting results. Stuart insisted that the colour he selected merely represents a background palette and was only a vague representation of the tone he saw. He again often described an accompanying crackle of additional colour throughout. The results are as follows: 100 Hz. Additional orange crackle described. 250 Hz. 500 Hz. 510 Hz. Interestingly, a 10 Hz increase in tone resulted in no colour as such. Stuart described a swirling, whirlpool, oscillating, pulsating shape. 800 Hz. 1000 Hz. 2500 Hz. And when repeated later. It is worth noting at this point that there was always a 1 to 2 minute gap between tones, allowing for an adjustment back to ambient room noise before proceeding on to the next tone. It is clear from this test that what is seen is very much changeable. In many instances, the colours seen seem to be linked to the previous. In others, they are very much worlds apart in terms of tone and vibrancy. Again, it is important to stress that these colours only represent a background palette of a visual phenomenon almost impossible to put into words due to a lack of frame of reference. Much like a non-synesthete trying to describe the colour green, it is almost impossible to describe in any definitive way. It is all down to perception. As it transpires, cymatics, or the study of visible sound, has a long history of research, long before the term cymatics, derived from the Greek word chyma, meaning ripple or wave, was applied to the phenomenon. Officially, the discovery of cymatics is attributed to English philosopher Robert Hooke, who is cited as breaking the visual sound barrier in 1680, when he spread flour across a glass plate and used a violin bow along the edge of the plate. He observed that rather than the flour flying off the plate, the flour arranged itself into an oval shape which reoriented itself along the surface, depending on how he bowed the plates. It appears the first cymatic experiments were conducted long before the advent of science. Over 1,000 years ago, certain African tribes used to sprinkle sand on the skin of a drum and use the pattern formed through vibration to determine the outcome of events. Further early observation of the cymatic effect were observed by none other than Leonardo da Vinci, who noted, "I say then that when a table is struck in different places, the dust that is upon it is reduced to various shapes of mounds and tiny hillocks. The dust descends from the hypotenuse of these hillocks, enters beneath their base and raises itself again around the axis of the point of the hillock." However, 100 years after Hooke made his discovery, the phenomenon was rediscovered by a German physicist named Ernst Chladni, who is also known as the father of acoustics. In much the same manner as Hooke, Chladni placed sand on a suspended metallic plate and bowed the side with a violin bow. He noted that the sand moved away from the points where the vibrations were at their greatest and settled on the nodal lines or areas with minimal vibration. It was much later in the 1960s when Dr. Hans Jenny coined the name cymatics and built a device called a tonoscope, which allowed for the human voice to be viewed as a visual sound figure. Jenny used his machine to help deaf children learn to speak, as they could not tell when they were pronouncing O, A and U correctly with their ears. They could do it through visual association. Jenny managed to perfect his experimentation techniques and became the foremost researcher on the subject of cymatics. He later went on to say, "Wherever one fixes one's gaze, in whatever field of observation, be in astronomy, geology, orology, the study of wave movements within the Earth, or in the life sciences, biology, cytology, cell development, anatomy, physiology, embryology, one may observe the principles of cymatics at play." Indeed, when observing certain cymatic patterns that have been formed in previous experiments, the similarities between cymatic patterns and various natural processes are inescapable. As well as formations in sand, the principles of cymatics can be applied to liquids. Water as a medium produces fairly interesting patterns, but the introduction of non-Newtonian fluids, i.e. a fluid whose flow behaviour departs from that of a Newtonian fluid. For example, cornstarch in water thickens when disturbed, so when exposed to sound it creates some remarkable effects. Although many video experiments exist displaying the effects of sound on non-Newtonian fluids, the effect is best illustrated in a particular video from YouTube entitled "Non-Newtonian Fluid on a Speaker Cone." In this video, a mixture of cornstarch and water is placed on a speaker cone. A 30 Hz tone is played through the speaker, with the video being shot at 30 frames per second. Thanks to the matching frequencies of sound and the video frame rate, there is no blurring at all of the image, providing arguably the best display of this effect available anywhere. The substance forms bizarre, lifelike animated globules that resemble varying stages of evolution, from dinosaurs to bipedal mammals. Although it is fair to say this analysis is subjective, it would also be fair to say the effect would be immediately remarkable to anyone viewing the phenomenon for the first time. The type of substance used and the tone applied to the substance all have an effect on the shape formed. In order to catalogue the varying formations that can be created through variations on these parameters would take up a considerable amount of time. Let's take a quick look now at some of the best examples of cymatics that can be found on YouTube. For a more comprehensive and detailed look at some of the remarkable images produced by sound, the original film Cymatics, Bringing Matter to Life with Sound, was created by Dr. Jenny himself in the 1960s.
What we see here is the effect of vibration on a specific substance, lycopodium powder or spores of the club moss. We have strewn it uniformly on a diaphragm of stretched paper with a diameter of about 30 centimeters, which we now excite by vibration. This causes the powder to clump. We can see many small clumps, many small globular piles, and the more intense the vibration, the more piles there are. If the note is louder, that is to say, if the amplitude is increased, these masses of powder move to the center and make a kind of dust cloud there. An ever wider area of powder is affected, and more of these globules are formed. They are not at rest, but in a state of continuous motion. Now we shall take a closer look at these movements. Here is one of these forms. We can see how the material rises up in the middle and is transported to the periphery. This pile of dust, this heap of particles, is in a process of convection. The material travels inwards from the edge along the bottom of the pile, rises up in the middle, and is then carried back to the periphery. Even if the intensity of the vibration changes, there is still a whole system of radial circulation. At certain frequencies, or with certain tones, an extraordinarily interesting phenomenon is seen. Watch. We see two regularly and continuously rotating areas at either end of a diameter, going round and round like weathercocks. This is the expression of a rotating wave motion.
The 4-part series is available in its entirety on YouTube, and as well as exploring the visual phenomenon of cymatics, also explores some potential therapeutic benefits from exploration of this particular field.
The instrument is so designed to make it as simple for operation as we possibly can. On this side of the instrument is a sonic computer which will formulate the basic frequencies that you require for treatment. This can be then locked into the mind of it, transferred and recorded to a magnetic tape, and is then ready when you plug in your applicator on this side to apply to the patient. And the way we apply it to the patient is merely to switch it on and turn up the amount of output on the applicator. The applicator is then applied to the patient.
Another curious aspect regarding cymatics, which should be mentioned for its geographical proximity, as well as providing an insight into the possible prevalence of ancient understanding of cymatics, is Roslin Chapel. A Scottish musician named Thomas J. Mitchell spent 27 years studying the carved ceilings of Roslin Chapel. During his studies, he discovered a mystery in the form of 4 sections of arches containing cymatic-like designs carved into the faces of 215 rectilinear cubes. Mitchell discovered that the patterns related to musical notes, to be read in a specific order, postulating that the builders of the chapel had access to Chladni-style plate and bow technology and deliberately encoded the melody into the cubes. The music was later orchestrated by Mitchell's son, named the Roslin Motet. Outside of this, comparisons have been made between the architecture of certain structures and cymatic patterns. For example, the south facade of Notre Dame Cathedral, suggesting there may be a deep-rooted knowledge of the creative power of sound embedded through these structures. This is of course open to debate and discussion, but the intriguing mystery remains. It has become clear throughout this study that the phenomena explored herein, whilst rarely discussed in mainstream scientific circles, are very real, in most cases measurable, and when considered from a more philosophical perspective, can lead to some incredibly profound conclusions. Namely, that sound has a far greater effect on our everyday existence than we could possibly comprehend or give credit for. That sound can directly and measurably affect brainwave activity, can trigger response from other senses, and can change the very matter around us. This is not a statement based on conjecture, rather centuries of scientific study and direct application of these methods.